Hey there. So today we're going to be talking about rescuing your Chihuahua and the way to get your relationship and your new relationship off to the best possible start. Now, rescuing a Chihuahua is actually a really cool thing to do. It's a great thing to do. Chihuahuas are one of the most surrendered breeds. They are also, sadly, one of the most euthanized breeds. Now, there can be different reasons Chihuahuas find themselves in a rescue. Okay, it could be because the owner has passed away, because their owners have separated, that they've been liberated from a puppy farm or puppy mill. But quite often, it's because the owners can't cope with their behavior, because their behavior has just gone off the scale, and the owners are at the end of their tether. So if you rescue your Chihuahua under these circumstances, the chances are it's not going to be totally plain sailing. But there are some things you can do which are going to help grow your relationship with your dog and help get everything off to the best possible start. Now, if your Chihuahua has managed to go from the rescue to a foster home, then you might find that they're in a slightly better emotional state than if they came directly from the rescue. It could look a bit like this. Let me just put this up on the screen. There we go. So this is what we're looking at. This is kind of the model that your Chihuahua is going to have gone through. There may be additional steps in there depending on how many times this Chihuahua has been moved around. But you've had a previous life. Your Chihuahua's had a previous life. Let's assume that we don't know that much about it. They've then found themselves in shelter for whatever reason they're there. If they're lucky, they may have gone to a foster home, and then from the foster home, they may find a forever home. And they do find a forever home, and hopefully it's with you. Now, for them, it could look a bit like this. Okay, so this is kind of the things that are going to be affecting your Chihuahua's emotional bucket, where how much they're actually carrying and trying to deal with. So we have a previous life. We do not know. Let's assume that we do not know what their life has been like. Okay, they've gone from a previous life and they've gone into shelter. So they go into the shelter. It's massively loud. There are other dogs. There's lots of noise. There are new people. There are people putting training ideas on the dog. They're trying to cope with the new surrounding, and there's also a loss of autonomy. There's the loss of the dog having any control over what's happening to them. Okay, over their handling, over their feeding, over where they go, anything. They have no control over their life. They then go to a foster if they're lucky. Okay. Now, again, we've got different training ideas being put on the dog. We've got new people. We've got a new environment, new surroundings again, different ways of handling the dog, and possibly to add into the mix, forming attachments. So they could form an attachment because they've come from a high stress situation. Someone gives them a lot of fuss, and all of a sudden, that person is the center of their life, because Chihuahuas can be a little bit like that. And we'll talk a bit to this later on. But you're also dealing with a dog that is forming attachments. Then from the foster home, they are then going to their forever home. So you have now got a dog that's been through at least 3 different situations that the dog has had no control over. It's going to have a full emotional bucket. It's going to be feeling a little bit pessimistic, which I can see I spelt wrong there. And it could quite possibly be shut down and be very passive, or be very over aroused and very barky. So our dog's emotional bucket is full. Okay. It could be shut down and passive, which is quite often mistaken for being calm. Okay. And then they get the dog home and it starts to grow its confidence a bit. And all of a sudden you realize it's not quite as calm as you thought it was. But let's assume that when you get it, if it's shut down, it's passive. Let's assume that that's not necessarily calm. That's just pessimism. Or they could be actively coping. So active coping is things like barking, aggressive. It could be getting their teeth out. It could be growling. And it's at this stage that the dog is often labeled as aggressive, which is sad because it kind of makes it difficult for it to get rehomed. So this is a cross section of a very simplified cross section of your Chihuahua's brain. So like people, Chihuahuas or dogs have a prefrontal cortex, and they have an amygdala. Now, the amygdala is our drama almond, which takes care of fear. It's da-da, do this, run away from this, or fight this, or whatever. It's your amygdala that takes over when there's danger. And you have a prefrontal cortex, which is where the calmer, higher level thinking and decisions are made. Okay, so a dog that's thinking with its prefrontal cortex can disengage from different situations, it can make better decisions, and it can think even when it's in a high state of arousal. So this is kind of how our sports dogs can work, how our rescue dogs, not rescue, how our just working dogs can work. Okay, because they're, although they're in a high stress situation, they can still think. Now, when our amygdala is in control, there is very, very little clear thinking. Okay, you imagine a child having a tantrum. That's the amygdala is just having a massive drama. You cannot reason with a child who's having a tantrum, and it's the same with a dog who's thinking with their amygdala. They are in total flight or flight situation. They are looking for danger. They are reactive to situations, and they are really going to be unable to think or make any kind of sensible decisions. So this is what it looks like for the dog that is an active coper, that is in a high stress situation. They are going to be constantly asking themselves, where's the danger? Now, most rescues will do any medical work that's required before they release the dogs out again. If the dogs are complete, then that will include spaying and neutering. They might do any dental work or deal with any outstanding medical issues that that dog actually has. Would be better for the boys if they were left complete, but I understand that that is just not the way rescues think, and the reasons for that are obvious. But generally, the girls need to be spayed when they are mature. Boys are best left intact from behavioural point of view, but I totally understand why rescues want to neuter the dogs. So the first thing you need to be quite pushy about sometimes when you have your take your rescue Chihuahua home is you need to find out as much about the dog's background as you possibly can, especially if that dog has a bite history, because Chihuahuas are quite prone to biting first and asking questions later. Um, and sometimes rescues are a little bit reluctant to give you that information. Now, some of the things you also might find that's happened to them in their past is that they might have been babied, they might have been carried around everywhere. They might have poor muscle tone. You might find yourself having to put in place little fitness regime for them. Some dogs just constantly wear nappies or diapers, and they're not even toilet trained. So these are things that you might need. It would be really useful for you to find out if any of that happened in the previous life. Now, Chihuahuas attract some of the worst training advice I have ever seen. Now, a lot of this training advice comes from these big Chihuahua forums. There's loads of them on Facebook where they've got literally thousands and thousands of members. These are not the place to get training ideas, okay, or advice. They really, really aren't. They're fantastic for bringing Chihuahua owners together. They're fantastic for posting cute pictures of your dog, etc. They are not the place to ask for training advice, because the people love to give you advice about what to do, and quite often it's this advice that is causing the behavior problems in the first place. And frankly, some of it is utterly shameful. And this could very well be what has driven your Chihuahua to the behavior problems they've got now, and why they find themselves in a rescue now. So it's really important that you get as much background of your dog as you possibly can. So first of all, it's really important that your Chihuahua gets time to decompress. Okay. Their emotional bucket is going to be really full. They're going to have had so much input in there that the Chihuahua, they're going to be completely aroused. They're going to have no room for anything new to happen to them, and they really do need some time to decompress. So while your intentions as a new owner is to supply them with a loving, secure home, let's understand that your Chihuahua doesn't know that. Okay, they don't understand any of that. To them, your house is yet another environment for them to have to cope with and for them to have to deal with. So, what can we do to make sure that our Chihuahua gets their new life with you off to the best possible start? Now, the first thing we need to do is we need to create a cozy den. Okay, we need to create somewhere where the dog can feel secure, where the dog can have a rest and not be interfered with. Okay, now that means we're not going to be picking the dog up. We're not going to be bringing our friends round, and we're not going to be making a massive fuss of the dog. We just need to give them the time to process what has happened to them and give them an opportunity to see that kind of things have leveled out now and nothing else is happening. Because they're going to be in quite an emotional state of mind. Even something that you do for the dog with the best of intentions, the dog could misinterpret, and that could be end up getting your relationship off to a bit of a strange start. So the number one thing you must do is give your dog somewhere to go, somewhere that's calm, and somewhere that's um, contained, if you will, because we want them to feel secure. Just letting them have the run of the house, etc., probably isn't going to be very helpful at this stage. We want the dog to feel secure. We want them to have a secure bedroom, somewhere where they can go and where they can just chill out and not have to worry about what's happening and what's going on around them. Now, it's really tempting here to be picking your Chihuahua up because I understand why you would want to do that. You want to show the dog that everything's going to be okay, that that you love them and nothing bad is going to happen to them. But this can be a bad idea in the beginning, okay? Because your Chihuahua is in a high state of arousal. Your Chihuahua is full of cortisol. They are in flight or flight. If you start, and this is assuming that your dog will actually let you pick them up in the first place, if you start over fussing them and over mollycoddling them, you end up creating, or you could end up creating, an oxytocin flood. Now, that oxytocin is kind of the hormone responsible for love, attachment, all that kind of stuff. And together with the high state of arousal, that can create an extreme attachment. Okay. Now, an extreme attachment means that the dog is going to be very stressed when you're not there. Okay. If they have to be with you all the time, it's basically separation anxiety. You're going to end up creating separation anxiety for your dog. That is not empowering. Okay. That is not good for the dog. Separation anxiety can create they're so difficult to unpick. But dogs can find it so stressful being separated from this person that they form this extreme attachment with, that they end up self-harming. That could be chewing, gnawing, or just barking the place down or whatever. So we want to avoid growing this extreme attachment to one person. And what we want to do is create an independent, confident dog, which is going to possibly take a little bit longer, but is going to have a much better long-term outcome for you. Now, Chihuahuas are actually known for forming attachments to one person and wanting to be with that one person all the time. It is kind of a bit of a breed thing. And then they end up following that person around all the time or crying when they're not around, etc. So this really is something that we want to avoid. We want a calm, independent, confident dog. And we're not going to get that if they're suffering from crippling anxiety or separation anxiety every time you leave the room or you're not around. So as our Chihuahua grows in confidence and they're moving around more and they're exploring their environment, we want the dog to come to you for interactions. Okay. What we don't want, again, is picking them up, stroking them all the time. We want the dog to let you know when they're ready for interaction. This is called consent-based touch. Okay. So rather than constantly scooping the dog up, we would wait until the dog shows that they're ready to have an interaction with you. I don't pick Prince up unless he puts his paws on me, okay? Or he actively shows me he wants to be picked up, because Chihuahuas are little dogs and they get scooped up at a moment's notice. They get carried around and put here and done here and shoved into clothes here or put into a harness here. And they may not want those interactions. So with our rescue, we want them to feel confident. We want them to be able to go, okay, I can come out here and I can approach this person and they are not going to get in my face. They are not going to just scoop me up. They're not going to, push me into a harness or whatever. I can approach them and I can let them pet me. And then when I'm ready or when I've had enough of that, I can move away from the interaction. You always give your dog the opportunity to move away if they don't want the interaction with you. Don't be offended, okay? It's a huge transition for your dog. So constantly picking our chihuahuas up, or pretty much any small dog really, um, against their wishes can start to create a conflict of interest. Okay, so is people ignoring the dog's wishes by not understanding their dog's body language or ignoring it? Then eventually the dog may start to feel the need to defend themselves. So as you approach your dog, they get their teeth out, or they growl at you, or they start to back off and they lose confidence in you. So, and for a new dog that doesn't know you that well, this is really important. So it's really important that the dog comes to you. We don't want this conflict of interest. We don't want the dog to feel worried to approach you, that every time they come near you that they're going to get scooped up and pushed into something that they probably don't want to do, or they may not want to do, especially at this early in your relationship. Now, at this point, we're still in decompression mode. Okay. We're still, this could take a few weeks. I don't want you to think this is just going to take a couple of days. It depends on the dog and the dog's mindset and the dog's emotional baggage and where they actually are. But decompression for a dog can take a few weeks. Okay. It can take even longer than that if the dog is in a really bad state when you get them. So don't think that this is just going to take a couple of days. It might, but it's probably not going to. Okay, so be prepared to be your dog's advocate. Okay, and to make sure that they are not getting over picked up, that they're not getting a lot of interference from other people, and they're being given a chance to explore and find their feet in this new environment. So the next stage of settling our Chihuahua, and people worry about this, but we are not going to be taking the dog out for a walk. The consequences of taking our dog out before they've had an opportunity to decompress can really impede your dog's training progress. If you take them for a walk when they're really stressed, their bucket is really full, and they're in flight or flight mode, they are going to be looking for danger. And this is could possibly end up creating what we call flashbulb memories. So say you're walking your dog out, and a car runs over a grate, or a motorbike revs near them, or something like that. That is a stressful situation for your dog, because your dog is in a high state of arousal. That goes in bang like a flashbulb memory. And what they do the following day is going to be driven by what happened yesterday, if you understand. So we don't take our dog out for a walk. They're not ready for that. And taking them out too early can really impact and cause your dog's problem. Now, I'll give you an example of this. Is I had a client, this wasn't a Chihuahua, it's a Dachshund. She was a lovely person and full of good intention. She got this Chihuahua, sorry, she got this Dachshund from, it was an ex-puppy farm, okay? And she took the dog home, and the first thing she did with it is she put a harness on it, bearing in mind the dog had never worn a harness before in its life, had never walked on a lead in its life, and she took it out for a walk. Now, I kind of understand why, okay? Because she wanted the dog to show, this is your life now. You're going to have a great life. You're going to have lots of freedom. You're going to have fresh air. You're going to have walks. Everything's going to be great. But for the Dachshund, for the little dog, that was just too much. They'd already had this transition to shelter, or the rescue, hadn't had a foster home. It'd come straight to this house, and then so it had that transition, and then all of a sudden it's been pushed into a huge environment that it just knew nothing about. Okay, the result of that was the dog just flipped. Okay, it was literally screamed the whole walk, was spinning on the end of the lead, and then, bless her, she thought the more she took the dog out for a walk, the more she would get used to going out for a walk. But actually, what happened at the end of that is it made the situation even worse, because the dog is then rehearsing and remembering that stress, and it's taking that in to the house with it. So what you've got is a dog whose bucket is constantly full, is always worried. And what the result of that was, the dog had just flipped out completely. It was barking at literally the tiniest noise in the house. Okay. Anybody came in, strangers, it went absolutely crazy. It it couldn't settle. It was constantly paced all the time. It was constantly over aroused all the time. And it did form quite an unhealthy attachment to the one owner, and found it very difficult to be left. So it's really important that before, and we'll talk a bit more about getting your dog out walking, but you do not do that. Do not take your dog out for a walk the minute you get them home from a rescue. Now, rescues really don't always give out the best information around here. And I can give you another example of this. Again, not a Chihuahua, was a German Shepherd. Beautiful, beautiful dog. We were out, the owner got it back, didn't have any concept of what had happened to the dog before, didn't know whether the dog had a bite history or not. Took the dog home, put a harness on it, took it out for a walk, let it off the lead, and it ragged a small dog, killed it. And then that created difficulties. Obviously, that's devastating for the owners whose dog was killed, but it's also very upsetting for the new people who've taken on this dog, because it gets their relationship off to a really difficult start. And it was really, really hard for everybody. So the next stage is to start building our Chihuahua's confidence. Okay, so they've starting to decompress now. We're still in the decompression mode, but the dog is moving around more. They're more interacting with you. So we're going to start building the dog's confidence. We want to shift their mindset from a pessimistic, oh my God, everything's bad, to a more optimistic frame of mind. Now that's seeking and avoidance. So like people, Chihuahuas have, all dogs have a seeking and avoidance system. Okay. So seeking is your dog thriving. It's a thriving frame of mind. It's when they're looking for, when they're it's when they're hunting, it's when they're scavenging, it's when they're licking, they're chewing things. They're all things that dogs like to do. They all help the dog thrive, playing games, etc. So that is a seeking frame of mind. That's a positive frame of mind. Avoidance is the barking and lunging, barking at other dogs to get them to stay away, getting their teeth out when they want you to stay away. This is the reason they do it. Okay, it's not, and I honestly have had a pound for every time I heard this. It's not because my Chihuahua is trying to protect me. When you're out on a walk and the dog has an absolute meltdown at another dog, oh, he's trying to protect me. No, he isn't. Okay, the dog is just worried by the presence of that other dog, and is barking and lunging and spinning on the lead at it to get that other dog to stay away, because that's what dogs do. Off the lead, your Chihuahua would probably run at it. Okay, and it would worry this other dog. Again, it's avoidance. It wants, rather than just go, I don't really like that dog, so I think I'm just going to stay under the radar. That is not the way they operate. Okay, they will go out swinging. Okay, if they're an active coper, they will chase something, they will run up to something to assess its threat level. They will bark and lunge at it to go away. Okay, they are not trying to protect you. They are not trying to dominate the other dog, and they're not they don't think they're a Rottweiler, and it isn't small dog syndrome. Okay, honestly, it drives me nuts. It is just because they want whatever it is they're barking at to stay away. That is avoidance. Okay, for a passive coper, that could be lying down, that could be lying on their back, that could be going behind you, it could be going all stiff and still. But depending on their mindset, there are different ways of dealing with it. Okay. So we want our dog to shift from an avoidance frame of mind into a seeking frame of mind. So from negative to positive. So the way we do that is by creating little games with small spikes of dopamine. Now, dopamine obviously is like happiness. It's the happiness hormone. We don't want it to be crazy. We don't want them to become addicted to dopamine, but we do want to create these little spikes and these little games where they go, oh, okay, yeah, this is okay. This is good. We like this. So there's lots of little games where you can play to create this, where you can create these little optimism spikes, if you like. Okay, so depending on where your dog is, it might just be every time you walk past their little pen that you drop a tasty treat into the pen. Okay, now they might not come out and get it while you're there. That doesn't matter. But what we want is the dog to get up and move. Okay, dogs are always better when they're moving. Okay, it's more positive for them when they're moving. So you might just drop something, part of their daily food allowance. We don't want them to get fat, but you might drop something, a tasty treat into the pen and just walk away. Now the dog might not get up and get it when you're there, but as long as they do at some point get out and go, oh, look, there's a bit of food here. Okay, so that might be where you start. And then once the dog gets used to you, you might then just play a little food flick game where you have a bit of food on the floor and you're flicking it around, and your chihuahua is chasing it. Okay. So again, nice, positive, easy to play little game. Okay. So you are building the confidence and you are building some optimism. Very important though that you don't overdo it. And it's very important that your chihuahua is allowed to leave the game if they've had enough. Okay. They are allowed to go, oh, I don't want to do this anymore. Okay. So you are throwing food away from them. If they don't come back or they go and get in their bed, then you leave them. Now, other things we might do to help create some optimism is we might give them long-term chews. Now, I'm not talking about giving them rawhide. You need to pick your chew that's suitable for your dog. It needs to be correct for their bite size. It doesn't need to be something that they can consume because we don't really want them to get fat. And the whole idea is that they're nagging at it because that chewing is good for their mental health. So it might be a long-term chew. Ostrich spaghetti is a good one. Okay. We used to give our dogs hooves, the bovine hooves to chew on. But then Macy broke 3 teeth on one of those. So they went, we don't do that anymore. So pick your chew quite carefully. Okay. So it needs to be something suitable for your dog that they can chew on and they can just spend some time having a little nag on. Another good one is using a lick mat. Okay. And there'll be linked to lick mats in the ones that we use in the notes below. So lick mat encourages licking. Okay. So, and that is really, again, it's good for their mental health. This is why dogs lick if they need to soothe themselves. So getting a lick mat, serving their dinner on a lick mat might be really useful, pushing it in so that once they finish eating, that they kind of spend ages at the mat licking away, which is good, just good for their mental health. So long-term chews and lick mats are also really good things that you can do with your dog. So if your chihuahua is now able to go out in the garden without becoming over aroused and stressed, then we can start to play some additional games in the garden. If you find if they go in the garden and they really can't cope with it, you probably need to go back a step. And there is another film on here about how on our channel about building confidence in the garden. So go and check that out. So they're out in the garden. Some really cool little games you can play as you can dot some bowls around before you take the dog out there so that as they're wandering around the garden, it's, oh, this is good. Oh, this is good. And they're starting to build their optimism. It's all right out here because good things happen out here. Okay. Another good one is to scatter some food on the floor and go round with your chihuahua and go, oh, look at that. There's one. Oh, look at that. There's one. So it's a scatter and point. Or you can just throw some food on the floor and let them have a scavenge with it, depending on where you are with interacting with your dog. So those are some really nice little games to play. Now, another couple that you can play with them if they're ready for this yet are orientation games. Now, I will put a link to those in the show notes, and there's some little games that you can play which get your chihuahua to focus on you so that you're playing with them and they're interacting with you rather than when you take them out, they're interacting and looking for things to bark at in the environment. So those are 3 easy little games, and you'll find the link to those is in the notes below. So once you're ready your chihuahua is ready to go outside, you may have had to do some work around a harness to start with. Okay, we want consent around the harness. Now, getting consent around a harness is like a whole nother lesson. And if putting the harness on is a problem, then that is something that we need to speak to um, individually. But let's assume that your Chihuahua is now ready to go out the front. Okay, what you want to avoid is going out the door and taking your dog on a long walk or a circuit. Okay, because every walk basically is a circuit. Doesn't matter how far you go, you leave home, you do your circuit, then you go home again. So you can see that there is a circuit. Now, if you take your Chihuahua out and they are struggling with that, they are barking at other dogs, they're shut down, they're unhappy, you can see by their body language that they're struggling, then this circuit is simply too big. Okay. And if you keep pushing them through it, you run the risk of the owner with our dachshund, and that is then rehearsing anxiety and stress around your walk, which we don't want. So if your Chihuahua is ready to go outside, you would start with what we call micro walks or tiny little circuits. Now, at one time for Prince, this was just simply sitting on the front door, on the front doorstep, play a couple of little games, little confidence building games, and bring him in again. Simple as that. Then, as he got more confident, we would then take him down the front lawn. Obviously, this depends on your setup with your house or whatever, but we'd take him down the front garden, we'd play some little fun games with him, and then we'd bring him back in again. And as he got more and more confident in the environment, we would then increase the length of his walk to the point where we could get him on a reasonable walk without him becoming so over aroused he couldn't cope. So introducing your Chihuahua's walk slowly and gently and in easy little steps is super important. Now, if your Chihuahua is finding handling being difficult or coming up to you being difficult, another really good quick game you can play with them is just sit on the floor and you're just going to flick food out. Okay, we're not luring our dog to walk on you, we're flicking food out and then we're getting them to orient back to you, would be the first stage of that. So you might just sit on the floor and just flick a little bit of food around, and your Chihuahua then will go and get the food and they will orientate back to you. And as they become more confident, you might then just put a bit of food a little bit closer. You might throw food under your legs or whatever, and the dog runs through and gets it. What we're not going to do is lure them up like that to crawl all over you. We want to encourage them to make the decision themselves by just chucking some food around, creating some optimism, and having some fun with the dog. So that can help them get used to being around you. And it's also quite a good game to play with other members of the family, so your Chihuahua doesn't just become super focused on one person. Okay, last but not least, okay, I know this has been a long one and I hope you're still with me and you haven't fallen asleep. And I hope this has some value for you, okay? Last but not least is you, okay? Your dog is not a rescue. Okay. So I want you to change the label. Okay. Now, the amount of times I've heard, I'm sorry, he's a rescue. Okay. And people are using that to excuse bad behavior. Oh, I'm sorry, he's a rescue. Barking and lunging, just generally not coping with the environment. Oh, I'm sorry, he's a rescue. Using that as an excuse disempowers you as an owner to do something about it. Okay. One, if your Chihuahua is barking and lunging at other dogs and behaving in a way that makes you feel the need to go, sorry, he's a rescue, you shouldn't be out. Okay. Need to go back a step and you need to be doing some work to build your dog's confidence at home. But more importantly than that is you need to go, not a rescue. He's my dog now. Okay. That's my dog has XYZ behavior challenges, and I am going to work on them to help them overcome them and become confident so that when I'm taking my dog out, they're not barking and lunging at other dogs. They're focused on you, they're happy, they're running around, and they're confident. Now, if you don't know how to do that, and it is quite a big thing, this is the whole point of Chihuahua School. This is why I developed Chihuahua School, to help owners like you get the dog they originally dreamed of. Now, that doesn't matter whether they're a pup, that you got them from a puppy, or whether they were a rescue, or whatever their background, okay? Whatever your training struggle is, Chihuahua School can help. Okay, Chihuahua School is an award-winning online program that I started while I was looking for solutions for my own dogs. Okay, and which led me to become a pro dog trainer, behavior coach, and canine nutritionist. So I started Chihuahua School so I can help owners like you get the dog you dreamed of. So if you are struggling, if you feel that you need a hand, you can jump into Chihuahua School. It's a monthly subscription, £36 a month. The link is below, and together we can work through your dog's behavior struggles, and I will show you how to transform your dog's behavior, how to get a confident, happy dog that you can take out where you don't have to go, I'm sorry, he's a rescue, because he isn't. Okay, he is your dog. I know this has been a long one. I'm really glad you stuck with me. Well, I hope you stuck with me. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope you found value here. I would love it if you could subscribe to our YouTube channel, if you could like this video, and if you found it useful or you have any questions, please put the comments in below and I will come back to you and I will answer any of your questions. So bye-bye from now, and I've enjoyed talking to you. Take care. Bye-bye.